Rita Moreno just told the truth about Marlon Brando when she was 93 years old. She tried to kill herself with his pills after finding him in bed with someone else. She also said that Elvis slept with her and then broke up with her after only 2 dates. Not only that, but doctors almost killed her during the illegal abortion they did. Hollywood hid these crimes for decades, but now Rita is finally letting everyone know, including which famous director raped her in acting school. Her real name is Rosa Dolores Alverio, and she was born on December 11, 1931 in Humacao, Puerto Rico. The poor family she came from had 3 girls, and she was the youngest. Rosa Maria Duran and Juan Antonio Garcia were her parents. They lived in Trujillo Alto, a small town that wasn't even built up enough to have a hospital. That's why her mother gave birth to her in Humacao. It was easy but hard to live in Trujillo Alto. Things changed for Rita when she was 5. Their lives would be different because of what her mother chose. She got their things together and left Puerto Rico. She took Rita with her to New York City. They took the ship SS Carabobo and left Rita's father and younger brother behind. The trip wasn't easy. The family split wasn't just about giving her a better chance. Rumors that her father was cheating on her added to the pain of their separation. New York wasn't like home at all. Rita grew up in the lush green countryside and warm tropical air. Now she was in a city with gray buildings and crowded streets. Everything was cold. She later said it was like the opposite of the Wizard of Oz moment. It didn't feel like she was stepping into a world of color. She thought she had lost it. She was hurt the most in the first winter. It was her first time seeing snow. She had imagined a beautiful sight, but what she saw was cold, wet, and unpleasant. Even after many years, she could still remember how shocked she was. But snow was only one of many changes. It was hard for her and her mother to talk to each other because they didn't speak English. It got tiring to do simple things. People were mean to them, and Rita felt like a stranger for the first time in her life. Her racism wasn't just from adults. Kids she met at school made her feel like she wasn't welcome. They moved into a small Bronx room that was shared with family members. New York was a tight and strange place to live. It was even different with the food. She had only eaten rice and beans as a child, but now she was shown apple pie and Boston baked beans. Everything seemed strange. Even with everything going on, she wouldn't give up. She began taking dance lessons when she was 6 years old. She learned how to dance Spanish with Paco Canino, who was Rita Hayworth's uncle. It was just something she did at first, but it quickly became clear that she was very good at it. She felt at ease acting even when she was a child. In Puerto Rico, she loved dancing for her grandpa. Now in New York, she felt the same happiness on the stages. Soon people began to notice how talented she was. She did her first formal show when she was only 9 years old. It took place in the Greenwich Village bar. It was strange for a child to act there, but that was back in the day. That night was just the start. She was singing at bars all over the city by the time she was in her early teens. She sometimes traveled through New York by herself at night, with only her fire and determination with her. She wasn't just doing it for herself, it was for her family too. Everything changed again when I was 17. A person looking for talent saw her at a Spanish dance show and thought she was great. He set up a meeting with a man named S.B. Mayer ran MGM Studios. There were few guys in Hollywood with as much power as Fred Mayer. The meeting took place in New York at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. It was very different from the Bronx. She stood in front of Mayer and waited with her mother by her side. He only had to look at her once to say, "My God, she's a Spanish Elizabeth Taylor." Rita Moreno was signed to MGM right then and there. It felt like stepping into a dream when I got to Hollywood. She couldn't believe she was on the same studio lot as the sets of so many famous movies. She was so thrilled that she pretty much lived on set. It felt like magic even in the studio cafeteria. Roast beef with gravy, apple pie, and Boston baked beans were served to her for lunch for the first time. These were all things she had never tried before. But what happened next was much worse. Lana Turner and Elizabeth Taylor walked in while she was eating. Rita froze up. For years she looked up to Elizabeth Taylor, like she copied everything about her, even the way her eyes were shaped. To get Taylor's famous shape, she even wore a waist trainer. But Hollywood had its own rules, and Rita later said, "I thought I would wet my knickers." People in the US thought her real name was too foreign for them to understand. The people at the studio agreed to change her name to Rita Moreno after the star Rita Hayworth and her stepfather's last name. At first she didn't want to do it, but she had to. To get the job she had to follow their rules. Hollywood saw Moreno from the start as an empty slate, someone who could play any foreign part. Her being Puerto Rican didn't matter. She played a Polynesian in Pagan Love Song 1950, a Burmese in The King and I 1956, and an Egyptian in other movies. Their job was to make her look the part, so they darkened her skin. The business world didn't care about being real, they just wanted her to fit whatever alien image they needed. In the end, she called these plays dusky maiden roles. A lot of the time they were one-dimensional figures who only looked pretty and strange. For West Side Story, which won her an Oscar in 1961, she kept getting the same things. People in the business thought of her only as an ethnic performer. In the beginning of her work she had both happy and sad times. In the 1950 movie So Young So Bad she played her first role as Rosita Moreno. After 2 years she got her big break when she played Zelda Zanders in Singin' in the Rain 1952. She wasn't cast in a standard part for once. For a short time it seemed like she had made it when she worked with Gene Kelly and Debbie Reynolds. Things didn't change after that. She kept getting the same kinds of jobs in Hollywood. In the 1956 movie The King and I she played Tuptim, a young woman stuck in a planned marriage. This was one of her most well-known early movies. The movie was a big hit, but Moreno felt like it was another letdown. The part was not interesting. She could only look sad and pretty. Yul Brynner, who played the lead role in the movie, said that Tuptim was dull. Moreno was most upset that she had to dull her skin to play a character who wasn't even from the same family as her. Hollywood didn't care if they got it right, they just wanted her to look weird enough. It had been more than 10 years since Rita Moreno's last movie, but West Side Story changed everything. She went on the set on December 13, 1960 when she was 29 years old, but she had no idea that this part would go down in history. She was cast as Anita, the fiery and smart lover of Bernardo, the boss of the Shark Gang. The part called for very good acting, singing, and dance. Moreno had been dancing since she was 9 years old, but the routines for the movie test her more than anything else. She worked out every move for 3 months, 12 hours a day, with the help of Jerome Robbins. The America dance number on the roof was one of the hardest parts. It took 7 days to film, and it was really hot in Los Angeles the whole time. Moreno hurt her ankle on the 37th take, but she didn't stop. She did another 25 takes because she wouldn't let the pain stop her. The crowd went crazy for her. Her work on Anita made her more than just a supporting character. She gave her a voice, a personality, and a level of depth that was uncommon for Latina parts at the time. But it wasn't always a dream to be in West Side Story. One of the few real Puerto Ricans in the group was Moreno. Most of the artists who played the sharks were white people who put on brown face paint to look Latino. It was normal in Hollywood, but it was embarrassing. The makeup artists didn't care that Puerto Ricans have different skin tones because they used the same dark shade on all of them. Moreno finally spoke up one day. "Why do I have to wear such dark makeup? I'm not that color," she said. The makeup artist snapped at her, "What are you, a racist?" She was shocked and didn't say anything. In an interview in 2021 she said, "I was so shocked that I shut up because I didn't know what to say." But the problems didn't end there. The job put a lot of physical stress on the actor. As America was being filmed, temps rose above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 37.8 degrees Celsius. Moreno kept going even though her arms and shoulders were blistered from being out in the sun for 5 days. She knew how important this movie was and was ready to do anything to make sure it was perfect. On April 9, 1962, the 34th Academy Awards were held at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. That night everything changed. Moreno was in the crowd when the contestants for Best Supporting Actress were named. She couldn't move when her name was called. She was the first Latina to win an Oscar, which was a big deal at the time. She looked very upset as she walked up to the stage and said, "I can't believe it. Good Lord, I leave you with that." That was all she said for 15 seconds, making it one of the shortest victory speeches in Oscar history. That win made a huge difference. It would be 38 years before Benicio del Toro, another Latino actor, won an Oscar for his work. It was supposed that Moreno's win would change Hollywood, but in the months that followed she learned something very sad. The stories she was getting were the same as before. They were for stereotypical Spitfire Latina parts with the same accents. There was nothing that showed how deep she was as Anita. She did something brave. She stopped making movies for 7 years. She turned down parts that would have made her seem like a cliché. She refused to play roles that were offensive to her culture, even though it was risky and could have cost her her job. She was ready to wait for better parts if Hollywood wasn't ready to give them to her. Then in 1968 she went back to movies with Marlon Brando in The Night of the Following Day. The following year she had parts in Poppy and Marlowe, both with James Garner. She was making a name for herself not only in Hollywood but also on Broadway, where she was the lead in Last of the Red Hot Lovers in 1969 and Gantry in 1970. Then there was The Ritz, a funny, fast-paced movie that did really well. It was impossible to forget how she played Gucci Gomez, a loud and dramatic Puerto Rican singer. She won the Tony Award for Best Featured Actress in 1975. She did more work on stage after that. In 1985 she played the lead role in a Chicago production of The Odd Couple with Women. The Sarah Siddons Award, which goes to the best stage players in the city, was given to her for her work, but some people didn't remember that show well. Years later, Sally Struthers, who worked with her, said in an interview that it had been hard to work with Moreno. She said Moreno was mean and things got better after she left the play and Brenda Vaccaro took her place. Moreno had been on TV since 1971 and was a well-known figure by the 1970s. She was the lead in the PBS kids show The Electric Company from 1973 to 1977. She yelled the famous opening line, "Hey, hey, you guys." She played Millie, the helper Pandora, who was always getting into trouble, and Otto, a director with a short fuse. The show was a huge hit and it was a fun and clever way for kids to learn to read. She also kept working in movies at the same time. In 1971 she was in the play Carnal Knowledge, which was directed by Mike Nichols. People like Jack Nicholson, Candice Bergen, Anne Margaret, and Art Garfunkel were in the movie. A prostitute named Louise was played by Moreno. The figure played dice with Nicholson. People who saw the movie said it was brave for its time. Then in 1976 she played Gucci Gomez again in The Ritz, the movie version of the hit Broadway show directed by Richard Lester. In the movie, Jack Weston, Jerry Stiller, and F. Dr. Murray Abraham. The plot was crazy and funny, and Moreno's over-the-top act stole the show. Charles Champlin, a reviewer for the Los Angeles Times, said that the movie was surprisingly good and that both Moreno and Weston were very funny in it. She was on The Muppet Show in 1977 and got a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Individual Performance in a Variety or Music Program for that performance. That win changed the world. She won an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony, making her only the third person in history to do so. Richard Rodgers and Helen Hayes were the only ones who had done it before her. She wasn't done yet. This time it was for her guest best part on The Rockford Files in 1978. In 3 episodes she played Rita Kapkovic, a person who used to be a call girl. She was the first Latina to win more than one Emmy Award. Rita Moreno has always been on the move. She has found new ways to shine every decade. Even after getting the biggest awards in show business, she kept going, taking on new parts and showing that talent doesn't go away over time. In 2000 she put out an album called Self-Titled, which was mostly dance songs. Marked by Vesa Sarabandi, it had notes by Michael Feinstein on the inside. Music had always been important to her, and this record gave her a new way to show off her talents. She wasn't going to slow down though. She was back on stage at the Berkeley Repertory Theater in 2006, this time as Amanda Wingfield in The Glass Menagerie. In the same year she played Detective Robert Goran's dying mother in Law and Order: Criminal Intent, which was a dark part.
After a year she went back to TV as the head of a Cuban-American family in Cane, where she starred with Jimmy Smits and Hector Elizondo. After that, in 2011 she got a part on the series Happily Divorced as Fran Drescher's mother, which gave her a chance to show how funny she could be. There was also work for her in movies. In 2014 she did some voice work for Rio 2, which was one of her biggest hits at the box office. Around the same time she opened her one-woman personal show Rita Moreno Life Without Makeup at the Berkeley Repertory Theater. Tony Tone, who was the artistic head of the theater, wrote the story after talking to Moreno for hours. It was a very close, honest and private look at her life. She played one of her favorite parts in years. In 2017, she played Lydia, the angry grandmother, in One Day at a Time, a new version of Norman Lear's old series on Netflix. The show got good reviews and Moreno's act stood out. She had a great connection with Justina Machado, who played her daughter. That same year she recorded a song with Lin-Manuel Miranda and other artists called Almost Like Praying. The song was meant to raise money for Puerto Rico's recovery from Hurricane Maria. She stayed linked to her roots even after decades in the press and used her fame to help people in need. She reached another important goal in 2021. She came back for Steven Spielberg's version 60 years after getting an Oscar for her role as Anita in West Side Story. But this time she wasn't just playing, she was also in charge of making the movie. Valentina was a new role she played in the movie. Her being there gave the story a deep emotional layer. Justin Chang, a reviewer for NPR, said that her performance was both a moving ode and a gentle correction to the original. When the movie came out on December 10, 2021, it was the culmination of one of the most important times in her career. On PBS's Wicked in concert that same year, she sang The Wizard and I, a full-length documentary called Rita Moreno, Just a Girl Who Decided to Go For It, was also about her. Lin-Manuel Miranda directed the movie, which had its world premiere at the Sundance Film Festival and got great reviews. She was called vampiric, spunky and fun by The Guardian, who also said she could command a room. Even though it had been years, she was still giving talks, getting Lifetime Achievement Awards and showing why she was a star. She was still taking on new work in 2023. She was in the comedy 80 for Brady, which was about four lifelong friends who went to see Tom Brady play in Super Bowl I. Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin and Sally Field were also in the movie. In the same year she joined one of the biggest action series in the world by playing Abuelita Toretto in Fast X. She was the grandmother of Dom Diesel, Vin Diesel, Jacob, John Cena and Mia Jordana Brewster. She didn't expect to move, but she fit right in. She played a character named Angelica in the TV show Family Switch. Her ability to stun people is still going strong. Her job has changed and grown over the years, but she has never let one period of her life define her. Rita Moreno is always ready for her next act, no matter how much time goes by. Rita Moreno's relationship with Marlon Brando was like a storm that she couldn't get away from. It began when she was 22 years old in 1954. They met on the set of Desiree and she liked him right away. Brando was already a rising star, known for how intense and charming he was. But there was something much darker going on behind the sweetness of their relationship. Their relationship lasted almost 8 years and was full of love, lies, and hurtful words. Brando never stayed true to her. He cheated on Moreno all the time and married 2 other women while they were together. She was born Anna Kashfi and he married her in 1957. She died in 1960. He stayed with Moreno and had kids with both of the women. She wrote later that his betrayals almost broke her. His physical hookups and even worse, his emotional betrayals broke my heart and almost crushed my spirit. She knew who he was, but she couldn't stay away. It became too much for her to stop trying to get him back. In an interview in 2022, she said, "I was such a different person then. I had all the makings of a doormat." She said that Brando was amazing in many ways but also terrible to women. She kept coming back though. She tried to turn things around at one point. She broke up with him after finding another woman's underwear in his house. But the next day she got a call that made things different. It was Miss Moreno. Someone said, "Hi, my name is Colonel Parker. Elvis Presley is my client and Elvis saw you at the 20th Century Fox commissary. He liked what he saw," she said right away. She went out with Elvis to make Brando jealous, but the relationship wasn't very exciting. Elvis was nice but not very interesting. Afterward she called him a country boy and joked that he seemed to enjoy his peanut butter, banana, and bacon sandwiches more than being with her. However, Brando's response was just what she had hoped for. He lost it when he learned about Elvis. He began tossing chairs. He was very angry. When Moreno thought back, it was great. Making him angry didn't help though. That didn't stop the bad loop. She went back anyway. After that, things went very badly. It was in the early 1960s that she got pregnant with Brando's child. His response was right away. He set up an abortion that was against the law. In the US at the time, abortion was against the law, so they had to find a doctor who would do it in secret. Brando paid $500 for the surgery, but the doctor did a bad job. He didn't end the pregnancy, so Moreno was in a lot of pain and could have had major problems. The police rushed her to the hospital. The doctors told her that her pregnancy was not going well. She found out after the fact that she might have died. She wrote, "What a mess, what a terrible mess." Brando gave a cold answer. He wasn't mad about what happened to her. He was mad. The fact that the doctor had hurt him was what broke him. She had been hurt by broken hearts for years and now she felt totally destroyed. She had no choice but to stick with Brando after he left her for his co-star in Mutiny on the Bounty, Rita Moreno. She took a bunch of his sleeping pills one night and hoped she would never wake up. She wrote later that this wasn't a suicide for payback. "It helped me get away from pain, death." Brando's helper found her just in time. They took her to the hospital and pumped her stomach, which saved her life. After that, her doctor told her to stop being close to Brando. She didn't come back for years. They didn't see each other again until 1968 when Brando cast her as his love interest in the movie The Night of the Following Day. What they had though was long gone by that time. Even after she broke up with Brando, Moreno got involved with someone else who was difficult. Her husband, Dr. Leonard Gordon, became her boss after they got married in 1965. People thought they were happy together, but they were not. They were married for 45 years. Gordon was in charge. When he was still living, Moreno didn't talk about it much, but after he died in 2010 she finally did. "I would never have talked about him without his permission. I couldn't do that," she told me. She finally felt free after decades of feeling like she was being watched. "It was a shocking discovery. Now that I've been watched for years, I can do anything I want." Even with all the problems, she never felt bad about having a daughter, Fernanda, in 1967. Even when she felt trapped in her marriage, her daughter kept her going. "If it were not for my daughter, I probably would have left," she said. Fernanda stayed the most important person in Moreno's life over the years. Fernanda surprised Moreno with a party at her house in December 2022 for her 91st birthday. Moreno didn't know. "She had told me before that she really wished she could have her birthday party in her new home," Fernanda said. "She didn't see how to make it happen, so she was thrilled that I did." Rita Moreno's life is full of breaking down walls. She did more than just win awards. She changed the entertainment business and motivated many people. She stood in the East Room of the White House on June 23, 2004. The Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the greatest civilian award in the U.S., was given to her by President George W. Bush. It was more than just her job at stake. It honored her work for equal rights for women and people of color. 14 people who had won the title before were among the 263 guests who were there to see her success. Then after 5 years she almost lost another prize. Her award celebration for the National Medal of Arts was set for 2009, but 3 days before she was shooting Oz. The White House then called. She had to be there. The film crew stopped working for 2 days. Tom Fontana, who created the show, set up a private jet. The president put the medal around her neck on February 25, 2010. He praised her for acts that millions of Americans had come to know and love. Moreno had won an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony before this, but this was different. It was about how she would be remembered. The Kennedy Center honors on December 6, 2015 were one of the most moving times in her life. It was clear that it would be a memorable evening, but she had no idea how much so. The music began in the middle of the service. Suddenly 137 Latina singers crowded into the grand foyer of the Kennedy Center. Their clothes were all copies of the yellow dress she wore in West Side Story. They danced to America in a way that looked like a flash mob. She cried when she heard the praise. People in the crowd stood up. There was a standing applause for 7 minutes and 23 seconds, which was the longest in the history of the event. After many years, on December 6, 2022, she got another surprise award. She was put on the BBC's list of 100 women. Since the list began in 2013, she was the oldest woman ever to be on it. She was 90 years old. This time it wasn't just about what she had done in the past, it was about what she was doing. Including her wasn't a quiet choice. It all began with a move. It was a gathering of 1,237 young Latina actors and singers from 28 different countries. They wrote a 17,000-word letter about how Moreno had helped their jobs. They had information in them that showed the number of Latinas in Hollywood had grown because of her influence. They even showed proof with an economic study that Latina projects had 12 times more money, 3% over the last 10 years. That was the clear message. Moreno hadn't just broken down walls, she had also changed the system.